Hey there, welcome back to the Teaching Firsties YouTube channel. I'm Rachel Hall, and I help teachers set up and maintain the literacy stations in their classrooms. If you are an elementary school teacher and you have centers in your room, make sure to subscribe to this channel so you'll have easy access to all the videos that are about literacy centers. Now today we're going to talk about whether or not it's a good use of your time and energy to grade the student work at your literacy centers. Grading student work is sometimes something that will take a large time investment. Do you ever do that where you put two words together, lot and large? It takes a big time investment. And as a teacher, you have 3 million things to do and 2 million decisions to make. So today we're going to talk about grading student work. We're going to have a conversation about some grading hacks that you might use. And we're going to talk about, do you want to? And we're going to talk about the teacher guilt if you don't. So a few weeks ago, I pulled my social media friends and I got a lot of great feedback and ideas about having a grading system in place for your literacy centers. So thank you if you were one of the people that responded. That conversation was really helpful for this video. Now with anything in education, you need a goal. And this is no different. You need a goal for grading your students' work. And here are some questions you can think about. Are you wanting to have your students show responsibility at their centers? If that's your goal, then you might just want to grade for completion. Just check it to make sure that they were on task and they did their work. But if you want to check your students' understanding of the skill they're working on, if that's your goal, if you want to see how well they're doing, then a little bit more thorough grading would be something that you would do. Now let's talk about that teacher guilt. It's a real thing. Teacher guilt is huge. It's massive. When I was in the classroom, teacher guilt was both coming from my central office, the administration way high up, and also it was totally self-imposed. Probably, I'd say it was like 40% from my central office and then, totally 60% self-imposed. It's just what we've been trained to do. We've been trained to give 110% to our students, which of course is statistically impossible. And so when I think it comes to grading your student work, I know I felt like I was being irresponsible or lazy if I didn't get to it. But when I look back, the truth was I didn't have time. It just wasn't, I couldn't come up with a grading system that was sustainable to keep up with it. And this is just the grading work at my centers, not the work that I did in class where I gave assessments or work as a whole group. But you need to give yourself grace to skip tasks that won't reach your goals of helping your students grow, both to prepare them for next year, but also to foster that love of learning, that lifelong learning. And if grading work at your literacy centers is taking time away from other important tasks in your classroom that would meet that goal, then it's okay to give yourself permission to not do it. It's okay to not grade your work at your centers. It's okay. And I know it's hard. I had to give myself permission to do it as well. But you have things to do. You have papers. You have their tasks. So what do you do with them? So here are some ways you can manage your literacy center grading system. For the one thing, you don't have to grade anything. No grading. You can use dry erase boards instead of paper, so there's nothing for them to turn in. It also will save time on the amount of photocopying you're doing. The drawback is that you may not be able to check their work, but if your goal is to just have them practice there at their centers, then a dry erase board would be appropriate. You can also have a system in place where students put their papers in their folders to take home or classroom mailboxes if you have those, right after when they're cleaning up their literacy centers. That can be something that you practiced. And we talked about how to practice your literacy centers too. So if you missed that video, go back and watch that one too. But you can have your students turn in their work so they can just take it right home and you don't need to look at it. What I might do, if you're going to do this, you might want to inform the parents of your classroom that sometimes work will come home that won't be finished or graded from your literacy centers. So don't be alarmed if something comes home incorrect or incomplete. That's from your literacy centers, and that's just practice. So that's something that you can inform them of. And then you can spot check your grading, which is just kind of take a look and just kind of see, after a while, you get pretty good at looking and seeing who is doing well and who needs more help. So another tool to do that would be Seesaw. If you use Seesaw, it's a great tool for spot checking. I found it super helpful because you can just scroll through the work. Now, either I could check it for completion or an overview of how my students did, because you can see their work, and you can just tell, your eyes will get used to going to which parts they were supposed to do, and you can tell. And it's an easy way just to scroll through, and then you can click approve all. And then you're done. You're done with your literacy center grading. So that was always a really useful tool for me too. And spot checking grading is great for formative assessments. If you're interested in how your students are doing on a particular skill, then this is also a great system to use. But the data you get from your literacy center activities can then also be used to regroup your students. You can see who is catching on to the skill and who needs more help, and that way you can regroup your students. And remember, we talked about how to group your students too in another video, so go back and watch that one too. And how often you should regroup your kids, which was more often than I did at first. And that was one of the mistakes that I made, was I didn't regroup my students as much, and I just kept them in the same groups, and it became stale. So you can use your formative assessments, your spot checking, to take your kids and put them in different groups based on their needs, and or to see who needs help with guided reading. So that's another option too. And then the third way of grading is if you grade everything. Now, let me give you something to consider if you're going to grade every paper from every student every day. Okay. The first thing is that it's unrealistic that you're going to be able to keep up with it. It just is, even if you have the best of intentions. And the second thing is that you're grading work that would be done in a group where you didn't watch them do it because you're teaching guided reading. And let's be honest, it might be copied from another student in their group. They might have extra help from a student. It might be done together. And so it's really not a good indicator of how well they're doing. So these are things that I would never put in my grade book. So it's you kind of got to take it with a grain of salt and figure out if it's worth doing, because you're not going to be able to check if it's truly an assessment of what they did and what they know. But if you have to grade all your work, that's something to keep in mind, especially if you're going to consider putting those grades in your grade book. Now, let's cover some grading hacks, some things that might make life a little easier for you. We talked about using dry erase boards instead of paper, and we talked about spot checking with Seesaw. But you could also have a former student come and do some grading for you, maybe during their recess once a week. And, at first I'd be like, oh, nobody's going to want to do that. But I think back, I was totally that kid that came home after school was out and was so excited because you get to take home your books and your workbooks and things like that. And so I would love playing school with my stuffed animals. And so I would have a classroom set up in my room, and I would play school. So I would totally have loved that job. If I was a 4th or a 5th grader, even maybe a 3rd grader, I would have loved to go back to my 1st grade classroom and to help be able to help my 1st grade teacher. So I think if you look back on years past, just a couple years ago, you're going to be able to pinpoint that student who would like to come back and help, and it would be like an honor for them, and it would help you out. So that's a really good way to do that too. And you could take a moment, if you can find it, because, I always say with literacy stations, when you're done, every single day, you need to take just a minute to talk about the day instead of just moving on to the next task. So if you could find a minute after your literacy centers to review your work as a whole class, and it can be pretty easy. You can just have everything out on your student's desk. Okay, put everything out there because you would practice your routines. So you have everything out there, and you can just kind of look. And it would just take a minute or two just to look, and then everybody can clean up. And so that might be a good way excuse me, that might be a good way to get your just that spot checking done as well. You can also do peer grading, and that might be a good time to do that as well. So that way your students can can grade each other's work, and then you know that they're you covered your bases as far as pinpointing any problems that they had. I hope that this was helpful for you with a million different decisions to make in education. Hopefully you can have some clarity on whether or not you're going to grade your students' work. If this video is helpful for you, make sure you click like so YouTube will show it to other teachers just like you. And I will see you next time here on the Teaching Firsties YouTube channel. Bye.